I'm going to make a general statement here that I think is going to hold true for the vast majority of our listeners. Okay? Politics is not sexy. It just isn't. I don't know of many people or many couples that go from talking about tax policy, immigration, equal rights, and then want to hop in the sack. We are back with another episode of the Erectile Dysfunction Radio podcast. Today, I'm going to be recording a solo episode. It has been a number of years since I have recorded solo. All of our episodes in recent memory have been interview style, bringing on guests and experts from various fields that pertain to erections and sexual health in general to lend us their expertise to better understand erections, better understand mental health, sexual health, and whatnot. I have been asked to go back to more solo episodes, and I have been considering it, and I do plan to bring this format back at least on occasion, if not making it into a more consistent way that we bring you content. I know that the original episodes that I put out were solo, and I know that we got a lot of good feedback about those, but they are a lot. It does take a lot out of me to prepare those, and the interview format has been something that we have adopted to bring expertise beyond what I can deliver. All that being said, today is going to be a solo episode, a little bit earlier than I thought I would be bringing them back. And in part that has to do with current events. For any of our longtime listeners, you know, this is not a show that touches on politics or current events. It really is not the focus, or has very little to do with what we do on this podcast. However, this podcast being recorded, or this episode being recorded, within 48 hours of an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, it felt to me like could not ignore the environment with which each of us find ourselves living in, and the impact that it probably is having on all of us. So this is not going to be a political episode. I'm not interested in who anybody is voting for. This is not a discussion about gun rights and gun control. This is not a discussion about politics in any way, shape, or form. But I think recent events have given me, and I think millions and millions and millions of people in this country and millions of people around the world, like a moment or moments to like reflect on what has been going on, because my opinion is that this is not a isolated, out of nowhere incident. It's probably something that has been fomented in a larger milieu and a larger atmosphere that we have all been living in, and I think that we are all being impacted by. So processing through my own emotions about just where we are as a society, where we are as a country, where we are as a world, felt to me like this is a topic that we should raise, because I think this is impacting everybody psychologically, and I think that this is having some impact on human sexuality, sexual function, and the like. In the previous election cycles, I know that rates of sexual activity between couples were reported to have gone down. I'm not sure if that was an exact study, but I know that that was a widely reported phenomenon. And I have to imagine that this is going to be having an impact on many people. So I'm going to take the liberty here just to talk a little bit about where I think we are, what the impact is, and what I think we can do on an individual level about some of this, so we can best position ourselves for optimal sexual activity. But more importantly, I think optimal relationships, those being intimate, those being with friends, those being with family, because the price of all of this tension and angst and worry and concern and depression and fear, I think, is a very heavy toll that we're all paying, and one that I don't think is something that we have to endure without calling some of it into question, without putting some of it into check or some of it into perspective. So all that being said, I don't have to remind our listeners, but I will make mention of this, that high levels of sustained stress are not good for the human body, they're not good for the mind, and they certainly are not good for erections. The news cycle is relentless. It is not going to stop. And one has to assume that in the United States, between now and the end of the year, it will be an ongoing bombardment of anxiety inducing news articles, anxiety inducing events. People are walking around with a tremendous amount of internal distress, internal pressure. There's a lot of fear. It's a scary time, and I understand that. Like, it does seem very tense, very scary. And a lot of people are carrying that. A lot of people are walking around with a sense of dread, a sense of fear. Some people keep it right in the front of mind. Other people have it going on in the back of their minds. And people seem really, really tense. Okay? This is not going to help erections. I'll also take the opportunity to mention that one of the topics we speak about a lot here are excitation factors. One of the most important things that make an erection go is desire, is stimulation, are things that the mind and the body will generally find arousing. Now, I'm going to make a general statement here that I think is going to hold true for the vast majority of our listeners. Okay? Politics is not sexy. It just isn't. I don't know of many people or many couples that go from talking about tax policy, immigration, equal rights, and then want to hop in the sack. It's just not a very common bridge to doing that. Now, obviously, some of those conversations can be very intimate. It can reveal a lot about you, your partner. There can be a lot of sharing that goes on in those conversations, and I'm not taking away from that. But generally speaking, these are contentious topics. These are topics that people don't agree on. Or if they are in agreement, they're talking about the other side that doesn't. While there can be some bonding in that, it generally is not sexy. We need conversation outside of politics, political policy, and really outside of the hyperbolic nature and the hyperbolic statements that we are inundated with. We need to be able to take a break from all of that. We need to be able to not only turn that off, but we've got to be able to turn other parts of ourselves on. So if you are an avid consumer of like news, media, social media, it would not be surprising to me if you are finding that it is more difficult to get aroused, more difficult to gain and maintain an erection. There are people that are, and I would assume it's by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that get into an intimate situation, and while they want to be there, and parts of them really do want to be there, and they feel like they should be aroused, they cannot stop thinking about what is going on with current events. They cannot stop thinking about political outcomes. They cannot stop worrying about the environment that we find in. And I get it. I want to be clear. I'm not critiquing anybody who has worries and concerns. There's reason to be worried. There's reason to be concerned. It's understandable. At the same time, I think there are very few situations in any of our lives that are going to warrant this level of consumption, right, to the point that it will erode our ability to connect with a partner sexually, that it will like erode our desire to be in contact with other people. So like we got to still find the sexy, and politics, I think for most people, and I say most, I mean like 99% of people, is not going to be a real avenue that's going to lead in that direction. For most people, this is going to be a stressful conversation, anxiety inducing conversation, and there's a time and a place for that, but certainly not when you are trying to have an intimate moment, intimate contact, intimate relationship. Certainly not with sex. It's just not the time and place to do it. Another point that I want to make to our listeners is that we are currently like living in an atmosphere I think is highlighted by catastrophic thinking. The language around this election cycle is hyperbolic, and I mentioned that before, but the intensity with which the election and its consequences are being described really makes one feel like this is a like life or death, make it or break it type of situation. And I'm not a prophet, nor am I a political analyst, and I don't claim to be. But I know that I've heard that for a number of election cycles myself. And maybe it's true. Maybe this is the one. It's possible. I can't tell you that it isn't, but I could tell you that a lot of worry and angst and negative energy has been poured into and wasted on things that just did not come to fruition. Not any time in my lifetime. Do elections have consequences? Sure, they have consequences. Am I discouraging anybody from voting? No. Go out, vote for your candidate, express your opinion, advocate for the issues that matter to you. But there's a difference between advocating for something that matters to you and feeling like everything is life and death. When you are in a catastrophic atmosphere, and we certainly feel like we are being told that this is a catastrophic atmosphere, that has a tendency to spill over into how you think about a lot of other things in your life. And catastrophic thinking is one of the least helpful thinking patterns that a person can have when it comes to trying to overcome an issue like erectile dysfunction. It's one of the primary challenges I think that people face is that they catastrophize, that if things are not working exactly as they need them to immediately, they go into a catastrophic spiral. They let the anxiety overtake them. If a person loses their erection, they can have catastrophic thinking that their partner's going to leave them, that their partner's going to embarrass them in public. And that catastrophic thinking is really one of the things that steps in the way of a person being able to maintain that erection or regain that erection in the first place. And I know it's a little bit of a loose link, but it's a link nonetheless, because I do think that we are living in a very hyperbolic, very catastrophized type of environment. And erections, I think, do get caught in the midst of all of that, as well as other sexual function issues and challenges. It's certainly not limited to erections, but we do know that anxious thinking is a major driver for erectile dysfunction. And if you are mired in catastrophic thinking about current events, about the political atmosphere, the political climate, if you are worried about catastrophic outcomes and scenarios, I'm not saying you don't have a right to be. It's not my place to make that call, but I think this is an opportunity to pull back and ask yourself, am I caught in just a really well established thinking pattern? Am I caught in just a way of looking at the world right now, which just feels catastrophic? And if I'm struggling in other areas of my life and I'm worrying about catastrophic outcomes, has this become more of an ingrained pattern that is shaping my world much more than the world around me is actually shaping my thinking? So I think this is just a good opportunity for everybody to reflect and reflect inward as much as you are reflecting on the situation around. One of the phrases that I've heard going around in the past 24 hours is a lot about cooling the political rhetoric. And I think that there's a lesson for each of us to take from that, where we have our own internal rhetoric. We have our own internal discourse that goes on up inside of our heads. That's a normal part of being human. But when that discourse is also overheating, when it's getting catastrophic, hyperbolic, when everything feels like it's make it or break it, do or die, there might be an opportunity to pull back and ask, how can we cool off some of this internal rhetoric? How can we position ourselves so that we can connect better with people, whether that's sexually with an intimate partner, or whether that's just with friends, family? Like, how do we calm some of that inner dialogue, calm some of that voice, so that we are actually better positioned to connect, better positioned to stay calm, better positioned to hear one another? There's a lot more for me to say about this, and as you can tell, I am impacted by the events that have gone on over the past 48 hours. It is certainly a troubling and disturbing event to see, but I think what we do with that as individuals, what each of us do as members in a relationship, members of a family, members of a community, how we process through this and the choices that we make about cooling our own internal temperature is going to have an impact not just on our sexual health, sexual well-being, but also on our general well-being.